The Middle Ages. It was far darker, stranger, and more terrifying than the stories we grew up with. Behind the glittering armor and romantic myths lies a world that historians have almost never mentioned. A world built on fear, superstition, disease, and so many disturbing secrets that many medieval historians refuse to write about it. Today, we uncover 7 forgotten facts that reveal just how brutal, bizarre, and unpredictable life was in the Middle Ages. 1. Night air, fear. Imagine stepping outside after sunset and everyone around you panicking, not because of wolves or bandits, but because of the air itself. Medieval people believed night air was poisonous, a silent killer floating through the darkness. They called it bad humors, or miasma. To them, darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was a living force that seeped into your lungs, crept under your skin, and attacked from within. Families kept their children inside as soon as the sun touched the horizon. Villagers slammed windows shut, stuffed cloth under doors, and refused to breathe outside after dusk. If your child coughed, they blamed the night air. If someone died in their sleep, they blamed the night air. Even livestock getting sick at night was explained by this invisible death fog. This fear shaped medieval life so much that entire towns changed their routines. Markets closed early, churches adjusted evening prayers, streets emptied before sunset as if a curfew had been declared. Travelers arriving late were seen as carriers of sickness, bringing the infected night air from elsewhere. People genuinely believed darkness itself was deadly, and when you live in a world without science, without electricity, without understanding of bacteria or viruses, sometimes fear becomes the only explanation you have. 2. Bread that made you go mad. For medieval peasants, bread wasn't just food. It was survival. But what they didn't know was that sometimes the rye they relied on hid a nightmare. Ergot fungus. Those tiny black grains looked harmless, but once baked into bread, they unleashed horrors no one could explain. When people ate infected bread, they experienced hallucinations, burning sensations in limbs, skin turning black, madness, uncontrollable shaking, and slow, painful death. People thought it was witchcraft. They thought demons were crawling under their skin. Entire villages saw the same hallucination at once, causing mass panic. Mothers claimed their babies were screaming in voices that weren't human. Men ran into fields, convinced flames were chasing them. No one understood the cause. No one connected it to the bread. Historians now believe ergot poisoning might have sparked witch trials, visions, mass hysteria, and even religious cult movements. Some scholars argue it may explain the bizarre behaviors seen before major witch hunts, including convulsions, screaming fits, and sudden bursts of demonic possession. The Middle Ages were full of possessed people, who were really just starving peasants eating toxic bread, and tragically, many of them were punished instead of healed. 3. The dead were put on trial. It sounds like a bad joke, but medieval Europe actually put corpses on trial. When someone important died but had enemies, those enemies could still accuse the dead of crimes. In a world obsessed with reputation, erasing someone's legacy mattered more than their life. The most infamous case, Pope Formosus. 9 months after he died, the new pope ordered his corpse to be dug up, dressed in papal robes, seated on a throne, and tried in court. Witnesses questioned him. A deacon answered for him by lifting his dead arm. He was declared guilty. His blessing fingers were cut off. His body was dragged through the streets and thrown into the river. And it wasn't an isolated event. Medieval courts held dozens of posthumous trials. Nobles judged dead rivals. Villagers punished corpses for alleged curses. Even animals were tried. Pigs, goats, even insects. Justice in the Middle Ages wasn't about truth. It was about symbolism, fear, and humiliation. Revenge didn't end with death. In some cases, it only started there. 4. Villages had human scarecrows. Every medieval village had people no one wanted to acknowledge. The mentally ill, the disabled, the disfigured, or those who simply looked unnatural. Medieval society had no system to care for them, no medical understanding, no compassion rooted in science. Most weren't cared for, most weren't protected. Many were forced to live outside village borders, literally in fields, forests, or near rubbish pits. They slept under makeshift shelters or inside abandoned barns. They scavenged for food. In piles of waste, villagers threw scraps at them like animals. Children ran from them in fear. When crops failed or storms destroyed homes, the blame fell on these people, the bad omens, the cursed ones. Some became village fools, mocked, beaten, and paraded for entertainment during festivals. Their suffering was so normalized that medieval documents barely mention them. They were invisible, except when something went wrong, and then they were convenient scapegoats, and died nameless, forgotten, swallowed by a world that didn't know how to understand them. 5. Child abandonment was shockingly common. Life was so harsh that many families simply couldn't feed all their children. So what did they do? They abandoned them. Not secretly, not shamefully, but as a normal survival strategy, an accepted part of medieval life. Monasteries created foundling wheels, wooden cylinders where mothers placed unwanted babies and spun them into the building anonymously. Some wheels received dozens of babies a month. Villagers left infants in forests hoping someone wealthier would find them. Or they left them at crossroads, the medieval version of chance. Some cities even had official abandonment days, where families could give up children without legal punishment. The most brutal part? Medieval society didn't judge them because everyone understood when food ran out, not everyone could survive. Some abandoned children grew up to be servants, monks, or soldiers. Others starved, froze, or disappeared into the void of forgotten medieval lives. 6. Superstition-controlled medicine. Medieval medicine was less science and more trial and error with a side of astrology. Doctors rarely touched patients. They believed physical contact transferred spiritual corruption or unbalanced the body's mystical humors. So what did they do instead? Stared at urine in glass bottles for hours, matched treatments to star positions, chanted religious lines over wounds, used leeches for nearly everything, burned herbs to cleanse evil air. Even during the Black Death, some physicians refused to approach the infected. They diagnosed through windows, shouted questions from a distance, or examined tongues using long sticks and mirrors. People weren't treated like humans. They were treated like dangerous vessels carrying invisible curses. A doctor's primary goal wasn't healing, it was survival. Many fled towns the moment plague appeared, leaving entire communities without medical help. And yet, people trusted them because they had no other hope. 7. Executions were community festivals. Medieval people didn't hide violence. They embraced it. Executions were treated like a public holiday. Shops closed, crowds gathered hours early, merchants sold food and drinks, children sat on their father's shoulders for a better view, musicians sometimes played before the executioner swung his blade. People cheered, people laughed, people judged the performance of the executioner. If the executioner did a clean job, he was praised. If he messed up, if it took several swings, it became the scandal of the month. Some spectators even bet money on how many blows would be needed. Death was entertainment. Suffering was a spectacle, and the darker the punishment, the larger the crowd. To modern eyes, it's brutal. To medieval people, it was simply part of life. One of the few times the whole community came together. In the Middle Ages, fear wasn't hidden. It stood in the center of the town square. Last, the Middle Ages were not a world of shining armor and noble quests. They were a world shaped by fear, superstition, hunger, and unthinkable brutality. These 7 secrets remind us that real medieval life was darker, stranger, and far more human than the legends we hear today. And maybe that's why the Middle Ages fascinate us so much, because behind every myth lies a truth, and behind every truth lies a story no one wanted to tell.